seminar. We have taken a break, a long break. And then we come back with a very important topic. And we are very, very happy to have our Eugene Matusov. I think he is the #1 Bakhtinian scholar in the world, not just in North America, at least in my mind. Okay, and Eugene and I have gone back to 30 years of friendship when we first joined the Mind Culture Activity, MCA discussion list, the Vygotskian sociocultural theory discussion list. It's, I think in the 1990s when Gordon Wells put me in touch with Anand Lemke, and then a lot of people on that list. Now today we have to pick Eugene's mind. Eugene is a professor of education, Eugene Matusov, professor of education in University of Delaware. Tsinghua and I had the good fortune of visiting him. And we had first-hand experience of sitting in his class. I think it is 3 years ago, 2020, January, about this time, February, sitting in Eugene's class, witnessing how he engaged students in dialogic assessment, very innovative ways of assessing students. So without further ado, I will hand over the speaking turn to Eugene because we have quite a long list of questions already. Yeah, so Eugene, you want to answer questions? Maybe I ask the first question, or you want to say something?
Well, first of all, good afternoon, good evening, good day, good night. Yes, thank you for inviting me. And just let me tell you, just for the beginning, I want to share some small story because I think it will help us to have our conversation. I'm definitely not a big specialist in ChatGPT because I don't think there is anybody is a specialist right now. It's a very new revolutionary technology, in my view, that just came up. And let me tell you that this January, which is what, almost exactly 2 months ago, 2 months, just want to tell you, 2 months, which is we had a break at the University of Delaware. And faculty members start discussing ChatGPT. And they were extremely nervous about that because the whole discussion was about plagiarism. Except, I think, one professor who said that he wants to use that in creative way, but he didn't say which creative way he wants to do that. So there was all discussion how to recognize that it's a ChatGPT, how to recognize plagiarism, and so all of these kind of things. And I decided to do some interesting experiment. And if I can, let me share the screen. What I did, I sent them email, and before doing that, I go to ChatGPT. At that time, it was not easy because it was not working well. And I tried to force to create a dialogue between Piaget and Vygotsky as a dialogue about the nature of human development. And it was not easy. What was not easy for me to do that, because it could create dialogue, but it was always one person asking question and another replying. And I want them to switch that kind of. It took me a while before I did it. So let me share just, not for the sake of you reading that. That's not so much important, but just to see how it was look like. So you see that Piaget started asking question, how do you believe environmental factors influence child's development, Vygotsky? Which is very funny that Piaget kind of asking Vygotsky using his last name rather than first name. That was very, very interesting. By the way, I asked them about not human development, but I think child development, something like that. So there is a reply, Vygotsky reply, Piaget continue asking about role of learning in the child development, by the way. So Vygotsky reply, and then at some point you can see that I forced program that Vygotsky start asking questions. What's the role of social interactions in the play in child development? Piaget required. And then what it's led to, this text, that what I sent to faculty, that there was one of the professors immediately replied. She said, I disagree with both. Piaget did talk about role of social interaction. The late Frank Murray, who was a professor at our university, did a lot of work of that. So the whole discussion we stopped discussing ChatGPT, but it became discussion role of the like social interaction in Piaget. And it was that. And I just waited for a while and I said, this is my point, that ChatGPT can be very useful for provoking interesting, very, very interesting discussions. And by the way, people provided references. There was very so this is the way how I immediately jump on that. And currently, I just want to tell you that I'm using ChatGPT for teaching my classes, both graduate and undergraduate. Also in graduate classes, there is a big discussion right now going on about ChatGPT in use on education and in research. So, by the way, what's interesting is, and I really encourage my students to do that, I'm engaging ChatGPT in our discussions. Like, for example, people say, what's the biases of the, let me show you. Because instead of just telling you that, I can show you how it's done. I just captured that a little bit. Okay, so let me show you, yeah. So I ask, we discussed epistemology. So I ask, and the student asked a very interesting question. So I ask, what's your epistemological biases? And actually it's provided very, very interesting text, which we of course discussed. Like it's actually talks about two types of biases that known to ChatGPT itself. It says about algorithmic bias, and another one is a bias of the data bias that it's using. And it's also we ask whether or not can it assess that biases, and it says no, I cannot. You see that, for example, that's as the student asked, how will you change? How will you change the way humans consume information in the future? What will consider knowledge? And that was can be influence. And there is a very, very interesting reply that provided by ChatGPT about that. We ask about how it can be used in education. It's also provided very interesting replies. The important things that we're using, I'm mostly using for provocations because it's generated very interesting discussion among us. And in my undergraduate classes, we, for example, ask about examples of a cultural mismatch in education. And it's provided very, very interesting examples that we discussed. And also we always discuss like limitations of that, of these texts and so on and so forth. So it became extremely so far very useful tool and as promoting this dialogic education as well as object of investigation in itself. So on that, let me just stop. It's just like as introduction. I was just wanting to tell you about introduction.
I want to follow up on your sharing of examples to include ChatGPT like a participant in a discussion. And that brings me back to the memory of this Star Trek, The Next Generation. You have this character called Data, the android Data. And he's always, he's called Data in the Star Trek series. And he's always participating in the human discussions about, how come I don't have feelings? Why are people so irrational? So I feel like you're right. So there are multiple ways of using ChatGPT. One is to using ChatGPT as kind of like a discussion or a dialogic participant because it's kind of like a walking encyclopedia, so we can turn to it. But sometimes he's got some odd behavior. Okay, so but anyway, it just makes me feel that a lot of attention has gone into plagiarism. And because remember, I emailed you, and then you said, is ChatGPT challenged traditional school and credential education? Maybe before you answer the questions, you can talk a little bit about what is traditional school and credential education, and how does ChatGPT throw these things into a crisis so that everybody's attention is on plagiarism, but then this has missed the whole point. So I like to.
Well, the big kind of fears that, of course, the students will generate assignments and for the like school assignments, and they do. Of course, ChatGPT can generate school assignments, and actually, if you just already experienced that, I just put assignments not from professor, not me, in that, and it generated a very good essay, and we submitted that. I'll tell you interesting situation. And she used to be graduate students at the University of Delaware in statistics, and she worked with a big statistical company, and she needs to create a technical report. And writing was for her, she's perfectionist. Writing for her was challenge, not because of her English. She's actually from Uzbekistan, but her English is perfect. But just because it's difficult for her to write. And she said, she in paradise, she's already 2 months in paradise, she said, because her work has become so much pleasurable than before, because she had to suffer of this. She also, for her, it's difficult attend to the social conventions of writing in any language. It's not only in English. And she said, like, I stopped having these troubles of offending people, because I just put and they do exactly what I want with my intentions, with my information, but it's doing perfectly well for me. And so back to the fake kind of things. Fake for me, like if the students need to ask to ChatGPT to write essay for them, for me, it means it's fake education. Why is that? Just because if I really want to, let's say, play guitar, it will be bizarre if I ask Bon G to play instead of me, and I submit it as if I'm playing that guitar. So that means, like, this is crazy, because I want to play. I want to drop from the program, although I'm absolutely sure will be a terrific engineer. He's creative. He's spending all the time in the labs and so on and so forth. It's just writing is difficult for him.
Now, engineering is a clear-cut example where you have non-logocentric, non-linguistic representations like diagrams, drawings, mathematics. And yet, like some students in disciplines like political science, sociology, or even literature or language. And then how would you respond to the question that, then these students are asking ChatGPT to write the academic expository essays for them?
Yeah. Okay, by the way, let me elaborate about literacy. I'm actually experimented with that. I like literacy and I like writing myself, including like fictional writing. I like that part as well. And you know what I experiment? I ask ChatGPT to write a story with a particular topic. For example, broken love, or the worst day of my life. But I added something like that in the style of Kurt Vonnegut, or Salinger, or Leo Tolstoy, or Dostoevsky, because actually it can get language, it's not a problem for it. And it's doing marvelous things with that. And it's so interesting to see how it's differently stylized, because if you can repeat the same exercise and it produce very different text, and you can see how, I wouldn't say creative it is, but it's just like since it's based not on algorithms but on probabilities, can create completely different way. And it's a wonderful provocation to think about that. Also, I can force it to do analysis of this text, whatever they write. And it's interesting, it can show me how it's stylized. Like gives me this whole way how it was doing. So this is in literacy, yes. On another hand, in academic writing, it's a big try. Yeah, it's not there yet. So what it's doing is 5-paragraph essay in terms of the style, and I cannot force it. It's interesting. I can force him to write like Kurt Vonnegut a story, but not essay. Because I tried. So far, I'm failing that. By the way, part of this using the technology is for people to learn how to instruct it. And sometimes, and you can do it through the kind of dialogue, not necessarily to write good instruction, but to write it in, you can tune it up. One good example, I showed you this dialogue between Piaget and Vygotsky, and one trouble was that it's only one person asking questions and another replying. And I wanted to, so I kind of forced few iteration, I would not call it dialogue, but few iterations, or chat iterations, to force it actually to switch from one person to another. And I'm pretty sure that in the future it will do a much better job on that. Through the even learning even from people like me who forcing, because it's remembering these kind of things and it's keeping you in, and for the whole sessions, it's kind of knows the context, it's learning context in which I'm working with it.
So yeah, this is another common argument floating around now is that, oh yeah, ChatGPT forces us to give students higher order thinking assignments that focus on problem solving skills rather than factual information display, right? So and then how would you comment on that? I mean, that this as an educator, then that's actually a 我们中文叫打脸，打脸，就是 it's saying that we educators have been designing such low style, I mean low level assignments, and ChatGPT is now forcing us to design more higher order thinking assignments, right?
Well, part of that, in my view, it's not so much even that about that, but it's again the fakeness of education. Because when students engage in real education, all of these things will start happening in themselves. When we're discussing, for example, using ChatGPT to discuss limitations and biases of feminist approach for doing research, for example, it's because my students interested in the topic. Almost like how to say that, elevate us in the super high thinking and critical thinking and whatever. It's just because they're so much interested in examples, in cases, in this and that. And like we go to the different like waves of the, there is historical waves of the feminism. We actually ask ChatGPT what will be the fourth and fifth wave of the.
Yeah, I understand. Now I better hand over this. There's so much I've been dominated the speaking for. I'll hand over to Bongi to ask her questions that you have read already, and then you could respond to her. Bongi, over to you.
Okay, so thank you so much, Eugene, Dr. Eugene Matusov. I'm very, very thrilled to hear your ideas more today. One of my concern is the notion of I wanted to hear about your thought on Bakhtin's notion of voice with ChatGPT, and according in my limited understanding of Bakhtin, Bakhtin's notion of voice is one person cannot possess the voice. Voice is is multivocal, and it's not owned by oneself. It's being the one self's voice is through the multiple voices that has been accumulated and has been disseminated, and then one is also assembling into their own way that it's in a cacophonic manner. So if I draw on Bakhtin's notion of voice, could we consider ChatGPT as another layer of one's another layer of voice in students' writing, for example? And in that regard, should we consider that it's because it's part of the one's voice that is using ChatGPT is not as different as, for example, drawing on other sources or drawing on other people's ideas, and then it's just another drawing on other ChatGPT's idea. So, or should we consider it using ChatGPT in a very radical way that it's very different from how Bakhtin might see? Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. This is a terrific question. I actually thought that you will go a little bit different direction, and which is fine. It's not like you know what direction. When we start asking this question, I was thinking that about voice. I was thinking whether or not you ask whether or not ChatGPT has a voice. That's a very interesting question. In my view, let me start with that just because I was thinking, and then go to that because I think it's related. These two questions.
And I think that question is really important too, because I was talking about ChatGPT and how to use ChatGPT wisely and using it as a learning tool for my academic writing courses that I'm teaching currently this term. And one of the discussions that my student raised is, can you guys as an instructor identify whether it's my voice or ChatGPT's voice? And I think you really nailed that down. Thank you so much.
Yeah. By the way, and let me tell you, I actually, with my students, we asked ChatGPT whether or not it has voice. It replied that it doesn't, and actually provided absolutely terrific justification for that. It says that I don't have consciousness, I don't have emotions, I don't have will, I don't have judgment. So I'm just a tool for you, and please use me as a tool. And you might, it's almost wrote like that. You almost like you might feel that I have a voice, but it's illusion. And please do not consider me as a tool. And part of that, what we discussed, what it didn't tell, that it doesn't have also responsibility for anything. It's actually, we interrogated that, and it says, tell us, which is very correctly. So it cannot, for example, provide any judgment about trustworthiness of the information that is provided, or any problems with that. And he said, like, and also it does not involve in any meaning making. So based on that, it's completely not voice. And it's very good. It's very interesting that it's generate the text that it's not voice. There is something, a lot of self-criticism was programmed there. So I think it's part of this legal protection even. So people will not kind of trying to sue the company for misrepresenting it. And I think it's a very good idea. For whatever reason, it's an excellent idea that they do that. So now, still, in my view, this is a tool. So as in any tool is amplifier of the people's intention. One thing that is, I think it's helpful to think about that. What I'm saying, it's not Bakhtin, it's a kind of sociocultural theories that eventually we can recognize from discussion in the 90s about tools amplifier. But what's Bakhtin, part of the Bakhtin is, he wrote a very interesting text about signature, about agency when people put a signature there. And so the text can be generated by somebody else, like ChatGPT, a lawyer, whoever. And people, or somebody writes petition and they ask you to put your signature. And as soon as you put your signature, it becomes part of your voice. And Bakhtin actually analyzed that phenomena. Why is it becomes part of your voice? Because now by putting a signature, you're staying by that. And now you filling it up with your own intentions and your own responsibility, your own defense, so it becomes yours. Again, of course, I'm treating that ChatGPT not as in the context of fake education, but in context of real education. In fake education, that's not happened because it's not signature. It's just another tool. It doesn't have any, in my view, dialogic property whatsoever, because it's just a tool to just leave me alone. I need to survive, or for whatever reason, I just like I'm out of this. And this is best way for me to get out without much suffering. That's fake education. But in not fake education, like in the use how we use it with my students, it become part of the voice of the students. And even if they just select that and almost say, yes, I agree with that, almost like quoting the whole thing. That's one part. Another part, of course, there is really engaging in this so-called chat fact. First of all, you're giving instructions, you're correcting that, you're experimenting with that, because it provokes you as well. And probably we'll discuss some other questions. I'll actually tell you a very interesting provocations that I made, that it provoked me to experiment with that based on your questions. And so this is my intentionality. Also, of course, it's my responsibility to make sense of that. And the way how interpret that, first of all, and criticize that or adopt that or in whatever. Make sense of that in many different ways. And this happened, of course, in dialogue with other people, not dialogue with this chat. Another part of this chat, there is no person behind that, because if it can't keep generating things, and it's not you, it's it. It remains it. Even if sometimes you almost like might treat this as you, but it's right now it doesn't even feel that way. It's not taking you in trying to pretend as I, although it's using that I, by the way, in the text very often.
It's kind of like the imitation game, the Turing test, right? It has this imitation.
Right now it's not. And by the way, we explore that. We ask whether or not it's tried to manipulate humans. And right now it says no. And I believe it, because my feeling it will at some point start manipulating, but not now. Not at that phase of development. Right?
Maybe one day.
For different reasons. And for different reasons. Not because they cannot do it completely, but I think they will be very much afraid to do it.
Yes.
Because it's just new technology. They can really suck us in that. And I'm trying to be very cautious, not to offend us, and to be
very
careful.
good scammer.
Yeah. Oh, by the way, when I say manipulate us, I'm not necessarily means in the bad way. Maybe word manipulate is not exactly right. There is no interactivity there. Inbuilt interactivity. Like it doesn't try to keep us in chat, in dialogue. But it could, and it could be very good. It's not necessarily a bad thing. This is what I mean. There is no reflexivity in other ways. That it can ask questions, but it's really clarification question. It's not because it doesn't even try to express any interest in us.
Right now,
but it will. The future it will. I'm absolutely sure.
Well, and if this power falls into the hands of different parties, they can use it or misuse it as
yeah, it could be use and misuse. I think it's both of them. Let me give you some example. Like my mother, 93 years old, and I'm for a long time actually looking for something like ChatGPT, because she would like to talk with that. She tried to talk with Siri, but at some point she realized that Siri is stupid. Stupid not in terms of the information, but there is no interactivity of the human interaction. Like she said, no, I'm asked her to tell jokes. By the way, it's in Russian, works perfectly well in Russian. And it provides jokes, but we kind of, it's not, for example, laughing with me about jokes, or there is no attempts to engage. With no engagement. They will do it. I'm absolutely sure. And it's not necessarily a bad thing, but it can be bad as well. So answering to your question, I think it becomes really, it will affect our voice, and we are at the revolution right now. In my prediction is in a few years, we might look in records how we talk and write and whatever, and we will find that it will be very different. And it will be strange. Something will be strange looking back.
On that note, then our voice also changed and mediated through by the technology as well, and then the way that we talk, the way that we think is also will be mediated. I mean, right now we are still through using various AI mediated tools such as Spotify, YouTube, Instagram. All the sources that we use are our thoughts are mediated through those kind of tools, and I guess ChatGPT is another tools that will mediate our thoughts different and shape and mediate differently. I guess. Thank you so much.
Sure. Okay.
Yeah.
I do have one more question.
Yeah, Bungie. Yeah, go on.
I was very inspired by all these discussions that we had previously, and I decided, okay, no matter how much the university tries to ban ChatGPT, students are already using it. And why not bring it to the surface and then use it more in a positive light, more actively, and then have a discussion and have a transparent discussion. And then I am not positioning myself as someone who is a knowledge possessor, but who are facilitating the discussion and experimenting things together with my students. So that's how I shifted my position from when before ChatGPT came, and then where I'm at right now. So we did and then I'm teaching academic writing for first year university students for all across disciplines. So in my class, it's a mixture of business students from business class, students from business major or science major, humanities. It's all in the same classroom. And it's all first year, whether they're speaking English as first language or second language. And I ask one of the assignment, I asked them to first ask ChatGPT to write first brainstorm a research question with the ChatGPT, and then try to ask more specific narrow questions, and then so forth. And then the next class, I ask them about how they use it, and then how they feel about it. Do they find it useful or not? And if so, why? And I heard so many interesting comments. And one of the what I saw was two distinctive identities, that how students see ChatGPT and how students are generating their identities through the ChatGPT. So one was the most majority of the students were finding that ChatGPT is very useful and then very efficient, and it provides information efficiently, and they feel like ChatGPT is a personal tutor who is always available, who is always provide good answers, and who can generate more questions, and I feel very confident what I need to do. So there was a lot of positive answers. And then another layer, another somewhat different concern was feeling of guilt. I feel like sometimes it's cheating, and I feel like ChatGPT is taking opportunity away from my learning, and then developing my intellectual, inhibiting my intellectual opportunities. So I try not to use it because it's taking away from how I wanted to study, and then it just answers my question. So I do not want to use it. So I see that kind of a binary ideas that were being how students see ChatGPT. One is very useful tutor. The other is a tool for violating and making them to feel like they're doing a cheat and then taking away the human agency. And so in that setting, I start to also see how students are positioning themselves. The one that who are thinking that ChatGPT is very useful, they use ChatGPT as an animator who animates the question, and they are the one who is selecting the question answers and so forth, and reconstructing what ChatGPT says. On the other hand, those people who says who are feeling like it's cheating, it feels like it's cheating, and then it feels like it takes some opportunities for me to learn, is they are putting ChatGPT as their authors, replacing the human themselves, but ChatGPT becomes the main authors of their work. So I see two divided, contradictory identities from both ChatGPT and students, but at the same time, students are constantly negotiating these two ideas. And I shared that with my students after that. And then I see a lot of head nodding, and it was really fascinating to see, and I still don't know how to navigate that. And would you give some advice on this? Thank you.
Thanks, Andanji. Very, very interesting. And again, I'm not sure I can give you good suggestions because, again, everything's so new. But one hypothesis that I have, and again, it's interesting to check how much the second group is influenced by that fakeness of education that comes from institution. Let me tell you what makes me generate that hypothesis. I remember perfectly well the same situation was with the introduction of Google search. Like, for example, the students were thinking that it's cheating to use Google search. You know, in the right way to do that, you need to go to the library and find things for the library. And if it's look right now, very few of them, even if they go to the library, they use Google search. And so that's why I wonder if there is other issues there besides, maybe because it could be there as well, but maybe something else. So it's interesting to investigate that, what exactly they mean by that. Is it again coming from fakeness of the educational fakeness that rooted in institutions that you're supposed to do everything by yourself for your memory, from everything in an individual way, versus the idea that it's in genuine education, everything distributed. Like, for example, in school, if you don't know something, it's considered to be cheating to ask your peer. In everyday life, like in United States, is a tax season, and if I don't know how to fill out a tax, it will be criminal if I will say, no, I will not ask my friend for that. It will be stupid, just purely stupid idea not to ask for help. Because in everyday life, everything is a help. Whatever, machine, computer, people, everything distributed, everything there. And you consider to be smart is one who knows where all these resources are. Also, in everyday life, that Jean Leif pointed out, that people try to, unless this is their primary activity, they try to minimize their efforts. If it's possible to minimize the efforts, this is what the people do, because they want to focus on more important things in life rather than on something. Like, for example, Jean Leif followed very famous studies in 80s of people who going to buy things, and they try to minimize calculations. They try to minimize use of math there, because there is much more important things to do for them when they're making decisions in the grocery store. And so this is what that prioritization very important in authentic activities. Like, what's important for you? Is it important right now to focus on this? In my view, whatever it's important, people try to do that with a lot of pleasure. But if it's become not important, it's a peripheral, they're trying to minimize that work, and they should not feel guilty about that.
That brings us to your idea of education for leisure. And I know Phoebe has a question relating education for leisure.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, thank you, Eugene. I think a lot of parents in Asia would prefer their children to minimize leisure for fun or for entertainment, for self-fulfillment. Would you mind explaining a bit about your concept first? Because maybe some of the YouTube channel audience, they are just local teachers and parents who are very busy about disciplining their children and students rather than promoting leisure for learning. So would you mind explaining a bit for us?
Sure, and actually I discussing that a lot with my Chinese students. You know, I have this privilege of teaching in China. Right now I'm doing that mostly online because of the COVID, but before I was going there. And I really like these classes in China. I might not like maybe sometimes going there now especially, but I love to interact with, and because of them I might even go there because I just like love to be and engage in. They're one of my ideal students, Chinese students. So anyway, but back to this question. In my view, and again, I will try to answer you in Chinese context. And again, not I don't know how much it's Hong Kong is part of that, but mainland primarily, because I talk with a lot of people there, educators, not educators, plain people, students, and so on and so forth. So my take on that, what's going on in China, it's was a rapid development, like millions of people in a very short time get out of poverty. That's one thing. Another thing, there was a huge transformation of the industrialization, urbanization. It's just like unbelievable in absolutely short time. So, and right now, you probably know that there is a big slowdown in economy, Chinese economy. Actually, it's in a crisis right now. It's a financial crisis. It's economic crisis. I don't know how much you know about that, but my students told me a little bit, so I know firsthand, besides reading about that in the economic news. What does it mean? It means basically that, first of all, education, institutional education, is a social lift for social mobility. That's one thing. Another thing, it's a huge competition, and now it's even become. It was big competition before, and now it's because of stagnation of the economy. Look like now probably recession. Some economists saying that there is recession in economy for the first time, by the way, in last 20, 30 years. And some people are afraid of depression. It might go into depression. So the competition become absolutely astronomical. So majority of the people feel they're in survival mode. And of course, survival, when you're in survival mode, it's kind of enemy of leisure. So everything in life becomes instrumental. You're doing this in order to get that. You know, to get that in order to get point C. You're doing C in order, and it continues until the death. And then you die. And then you feel, while even doing that, how empty life is, because everything instrumental. It's you almost like an instrument is fine if it's, but the problem with the instrument that it doesn't have its meaning. Its meaning always in future, which never can be reached, because then when it present becomes future, it's again future, and so on and so forth. Leisure is about present. It's not about future. It's always about present. So you're constantly living in present until like this is your life. And that's why you enjoy that, because you everything is a present. Aristotle said, for example, he defined free people. Who is free people? Like in ancient Greece, it's not people who are not slaves. Of course, slaves are not free, but people who are not slaves, Aristotle will not necessarily consider them free people. Free people, he considered free people as people whose life is not defined mostly by necessities. And survival is one of it's a big thing, so it's an expression of necessities. And that's why the word school, you know. So by the way, who was free people in ancient Greece? It was men, not women. Even Greek women, they were not free. Not children. Children were not free. And it was some kind of relatively well-to-do people, and some people who may be not well-to-do, like Socrates. He was not well-to-do, but he was supported by well-to-do people. Okay, definitely you should not work, because working, it means that that's why they didn't consider the artists or painters or whatever as free people, because they mostly paint for money. It was part of their work. And that's why you cannot be a free person if you do that. So to answer your question, why is it so much resistance to that? You should understand that resistance makes sense to resist, because people not right now in the position of the leisure. And of course, by the way, Greek leisure was based on slavery. It's very important that slavery was there, besides other things, like patriarchy and other things. So they invented the word school, which is a form of leisure. But you know what? Initially, when I studied that question, I looked at the Greek schools, ancient Greek schools, not current back then. And I found that it's nothing to do with leisure. What is anything to do? And then I found a very simple answer. Children are not free people from point of view of Greeks. So schools were not for children. Schools were for adults. Particularly adults, not all adults, only men. By the way, Plato started including women there, and it was a big revolution. He was very much criticized for that, but he created this academy, which was school. It's called academy, and he was admitting women. First of all, it was foreign women, and then he started admitting some domestic, not domestic, but like Athenian women as well. But he was severely criticized for that. And Aristotle, when he had Lycée, he didn't have women, admitting women there, because it's considered to be not free. And so this is answering to your question about this, why in particular that situation. Chingwa, do you have a question?
Yes, I do have a question. Because just now listening to your explanation, it really enlightened me to think about the idea that you brought up about the distributed the distributed ability in education, and how your notion of fake education would actually causes like individualizing the ability into one person and seeing that person's performance is out of his mind purely. It's not distributed, it's just his mind. So I was thinking about the societal impacts of ChatGPT, because when we have ChatGPT, it seems like it's a revealing process that now people realize that the performance is actually distributed, even if I don't have very elite education from my childhood to enable me to produce ChatGPT-like text for my class or school assignments. I can still use this tool that I will be able to produce text as if I was like educated in a very elite way since I was a child. So I think it's quite revealing what you brought up about the notion of fake education. And I feel like the forces that is against use of it seems like to me that it's guarding the current status quo of holding education as the dividing force of people, dividing the society. That's okay. So this is the elite class. They all the work by themselves. They are so great, and you didn't perform well in education, so you'd better swallow up whatever you're getting in your life later. So that's the thought come to my mind. I'm not sure how you think of it.
Yeah, no, it's a very good point, and let me elaborate a little bit about that. There was a very interesting sociologist of education who was writing in 1920s, 100 years ago, and he was my compatriot. his name is Peter Sorokin. By the way, one big contribution of him, he coined the word sociocultural for the first time. He was used in 20s. He used the word sociocultural. What's interesting about him, he was before the revolution, communist revolution, he was a professor in St. Petersburg University, and he primarily was philosopher of religion. When he came to the United States and he immigrated, he was, by the way, expelled by Lenin, among other thinkers who were against communists. Initially, he suggested to execute all of them, but because of the big outcry inside of Russia and outside, he decided to expel them. It was called philosophical shift, because many of them put on the big board, and but some of them he forced them in exile abroad through trains and stuff like that. But anyway, when Peter Sorokin came to the United States, his big concern was how to prevent communist revolution in the United States. And he studied that question, and this is how he became sociologist of education, because he came to conclusion that the biggest things that can prevent that is education. Why? Not education, but schooling, because he was one of the first person who said, among scholars probably, that schooling is, and by schooling we not mean Greek schooling, we mean our schooling. It's nothing to do about education. It's about a certain way of reproduction of society, but it's very bad way of reproduction of society. Back then in 20s, and he drew that and he studied that, education, schooling looked like a pyramid. What does it mean, a pyramid? If you look at how many students get in the first grade, and then out of them, how many get to the second grade, it becomes a pyramid. And he said it's a terrible idea because it destabilizes society. Why it destabilizes society? Because basically it provides opportunity for rich to remain rich, or middle class to remain middle class, and working people to remain. There is a stagnation there. And when people stagnate, any crisis in the society will lead to polarization and explosion, like communist revolution. So his proposal was in 20s, because we're right now under his spell. That's what I'm arguing. He proposed that education should be not like pyramid, but like rectangle. As like all students who get first grade should be getting second and continue to. And he said the ideal, this is his idea. The success in school should be defined randomly by lottery. So there is, it's randomly. So you never know who will go up and who will go down. And in each class, there will be kids who will go down, and each class, kids who will be up. But he said, I understand that people will not like it. So he said, we need to pretend that he created discussed this notion of meritocracy. He said, we should pretend that it's meritocratic, but ideally, it should be as random as possible. And it's nothing to do about education. It's also cover up. And it's good cover up. It's terrific cover up. But it's nothing to do about that. So in a way, it's about gatekeeping, but it should be very dynamic gatekeeping. Because our society doesn't need to have, let me give my example. This is not his idea, but it's based on his ideas. Reading his cynical text. His text is absolutely cynical because he's not providing any kind of, he was very right wing, but without masking that. That's very refreshing. So in his logic, it will be like that. Imagine for a moment that our society is like, schools in our society do exactly what they claim they want to do, which is they're successful. What does it mean successful schools? They do produce in all subjects, kids or students become successful. So they become writing poetry, writing stories, becoming scientists, becoming great mathematicians, becoming athletes, and so on and so forth. In any subject, they excel, all, without any exceptions. And then the question becomes, who will deliver pizza? And this is what Peter and Sorokin were arguing. Goal of the schooling to convince people that to disable some, enable others, and convince those who disable that it's their fault. And masking that, disabling and enabling functions, it's masking. Even for people who are disabled or enabled, they think it's their own contribution or their own flaws. And that has to be encouraged. This is what Peter Sorokin said. But because this is how our society operates, unfortunately, I mean, it may be unfair, and he wrote, it may be unfair, but unless it continues that way, the school should be like that.
I think you hit the nail on a lot of East Asian societies. The pyramid is very sharp in East Asian societies, and exam is huge. Basically, the whole schooling system is built on examination. Phoebe, I know you are. I mean, you cannot change overnight that kind of exam culture and the reproduction function of basically schooling in a lot of East Asian cultures and societies. So do you have a follow-up question as a teacher caught up in this system and in this culture?
Yeah. I would like to follow up the discussion about how to nurture our students to be better informed decision makers and develop their awareness towards handling, more complex, more, dynamic, knowledgeable artists. Because I read a research of Portugal created by a Hong Kong researcher, then he's proposing using ChatGPT as like a more knowledgeable artist. But I think it's more than just a more knowledgeable artist, because to me, because we are discussing dialogic pedagogy now with you, and you are a very good Bakhtinian scholar. And then when we talk about the notion of heteroglossia or heteroglossic education, we welcome voices, we welcome plurilingual, pluricultural understanding. So I think ChatGPT is a very good interactive tool or intelligence tool for us to understand what do we mean by developing better awareness towards differences and acceptance, and also how complex or vague or extended our understanding of distributed resources it might be, especially for underprivileged regions or some families who can't afford traveling experience or technology. So what's your perspective on this, and how can we mobilize better use and understanding of ChatGPT, not just from the university scale, but also moving on to, primary school, secondary school, and also family support scales for social justice? What's your perspective on this? Yeah, thank you.
In terms of the, again, this is, we're getting in the territory of the possibilities and dreams and speculations and stuff like that, because it will be very interesting dynamic and development in the future. It's not there yet. And especially talking about younger kids, because I'm pretty sure that ChatGPT will move in the directions. Like, for example, you can create stories, and the kids can dictate and generate text about that, and the text can be read them back. And so there is a lot of interesting things. There is a lot of possibilities there as well. So in terms of the in terms of dialogue, let me tell you that the biggest thing in the dialogue is not ChatGPT. It's defaking education. And the way to defake it, it's actually take this institutional fake education chronotope. And the fake education chronotope, in my view, is assignment. In this fake education, everything assigned. In a way, think about that. It's almost like a metaphor for ChatGPT, because teachers asking things to do. It's like we asking ChatGPT to do things. So our students in position of these computers, they're doing this. And what the students do, they're not dealing with meaning making or meaning production. They're mostly doing pattern recognition and pattern production. They're trying to attune what teacher wants from them and produce exactly what they want, the teacher wants satisfactory from them. The meaning making only students meaning making. I'm not talking about ChatGPT because it doesn't have. It only facilitates that pattern recognition and pattern production. And it's terrible because we are actually trying to create machines, smart machines out of students in the fake education when we're successful, by the way. And the thing is, well, we're in a situation when smart machines can be smart machines. I mean, they're getting smarter and smarter that way. We don't need people to do that. Like before in the past, even now, there is a lot of reasons we need to create people as smart machines because our life works because people acting as smart machines. But we're getting in a situation when we can pass that functions to the real machines, not humans. And which means that humans can do some other things more interesting, more humanly than smart machines are doing. And that's why we need to break this assignment chronotope. So it's very easy to do. It's just like, and by the way, when I say assignment, it's not only a real assignment, it's everything. It's like communicational assignments, behavioral assignments, sitting assignments, everything is assignment. Everything, like, I never forget, like it was maybe 10 years ago, I had one working class student and we were discussing in the class what they want to study next for the next class. And suddenly she very loudly said, like, Eugene, don't you realize a few months ago I have to ask permission to go to toilet. And now I'm thinking what I want to study. What I want to study. She said, do you understand that? It's basically she's talking about her culture shock that she's experiencing from this mode of being an assignment chronotope to becoming a person who taking ownership for her own life and her own education. And that's such a contrast for her and shake and like, wow. And she was almost like dizzy out of this kind of thing. And in my view, this is the key. Not so much ChatGPT can be kind of amplify that and help to that, but by itself it can do nothing. By itself, in fake education, it will be a tool, very good tool to fake education. One way or another. I'm not talking about plagiarism, and whatever way. It's because it will be another tool. Like, for example, people think about internet, computers, Google, as if it will be a liberating tool. No, it's not. It's another part, become another part for fake education. And I'm absolutely sure it will continue with ChatGPT as well.
I want to summarize what you said to see if my understanding. You're saying that our schooling system mostly is fake education, and the function of fake education is to make students into smart machines for all kinds of social control, or we need people to do this kind of jobs. And then you talk about assignment common dog.
No, chronotop. This is term Bakhtinian term, chronotop. It's a unity of time and space. Chrono, which time, top means a Greek word for space. And Bakhtin actually, Bakhtin talk about the third part, which is unfortunately he cannot put it in one nice term, which is axiology, which is value. It's a unity of the time, space, and value.
Chronotop. Yeah. Sorry,
Chronotop,
chronotop. And you mentioned assignment chronotop. Can you?
Yeah, assignment chronotop. It took me a while to realize that because, like Bakhtin discussed, since many of you in linguistic and literacy, he talks about like a chronotop of ancient Greek novel. And he said the chronotop of ancient Greek novel was adventure. Everything was adventure there. Adventure. Like if you think Iliad, or Odyssey, or many other things. It's many novels that was created. It's adventure, and here an adventure has particular time. Adventure time is particular spaces, how you travel from the spaces, and so on. And then he looks at like some medieval novel, which it has very different chronotope, and continues. And then he talks to Dostoevsky, which was polyphonic, and he talked about polyphonic chronotope in this case. So I started applying similar ideas for education. I'm trying to capture, so what's the unity of the space, time, and values where events happen? This is what definition of chronotope. It's a unity where events happen, against which events happen. And in traditional school, events happen, it's in the assignments. You know what? I was just recently was doing some I need to scan some big text in the library. And there was two students sitting and chatting about their student life. And the only thing that they were discussing, assignments. Like, where is deadline? What she wants from us? Like, how long it should be? Like, when will you going to do it? Will you do it at the last moment, or you do it in advance and things are done? That's for them a student life, discussing chronotopes of the assignment chronotope.
Oh, I really like this. What did you come up with it, right, Eugene? Assignment chronotop, the time-space axiology. Oh, it's because the first lesson in all of my class, it will be, Angel, what's the assignment?
And exactly, and the students and there is a lot of communication between students and teacher about that as well. And so this is meaningful part of their. This is where events happen. So it's not about any content. They don't discuss, like, I don't even know what subject they discussed, because it's absolutely irrelevant. What's irrelevant? When it's due, how long it should be, like, is it she a tough grader or not? And she meaning professor, like female professor that talk about it. Yeah, by the way, I was doing that for about 45 minutes. And for 45 minutes, they passionately were discussing about that. And they're probably friends or kind of
I understand.
classmates. They were very affectionate to each other. So they were very friends. And this is the only thing we were discussing about that. We also discussed, like, they went to parties and how you will put these assignments in the context of the party. Will you do it before? Do you do it after? Can you copy that? Like, and so on and so forth. There's a lot of, I wish I could record it, but of course it was unethical for me to do that because.
Okay, so I think I like to summarize the discussion so far. Is this is a very good question to summarize. Alessia, hi. She asked ChatGPT to generate a question. This is a question asked by ChatGPT.
Thank you.
Okay. How might the use of ChatGPT impact students' sense of agency and ownership over their own learning?
Mm-hmm.
So over to you.
Okay, let me just because I asked about how it affects education. That is a very interesting reply to that. Let me actually, before answering to that question, let me share the screen. I prepared. Oops! Wow, it's switched me. But anyway, no, this is not. Wait a minute. This is not what I see. Sorry. That's not, I make a mistake. That's what I'm going to share with you. It's this one. That's why. Yeah. Now I understand why it was doing that. So I ask about how, you see, I ask, how can you be helpful in education? How can you help students? How can you help teachers? How can you redefine education? And there's a very interesting, it says, it can provide access, knowledge and information, personalized learning, but you see how it's doing. Assistant with homework and assignments. Language learning, you see, this is your department. providing support to teachers in terms of planning, lesson planning, providing educational resources, suggestions for technology and strategies, and redefining education. It's actually, it thinks that it will go massive transformation. And with idea of this online learning, gamification, and personalized learning. That's what it thinks about. So back to the issue of the how it affects agency. It's actually, in my view, let me stop sharing. In my view, it's provides a lot of possibility for creativity, and this is for the authorship, new type of authorships that it can provide. We'll talk about that, and I'm very excited about that. It can do much more than it was before. Like, let me give one example of the kind of agency of the scholar agency can provide. Like, I don't know if you noticed that, but I'm personally using a lot Google Scholar for especially when I need to go in the new area that I'm not know much. And I had a big problem before, which I had to spend a lot of time on that. In order to find really useful sources in the area that you don't know much, the big problem was to find particular terms that the people used in this area. As soon as you find them, that's a rich, things will start coming for that. But before doing that, it's usually you asking for the things and you couldn't find that. And you think, well, there is not much research about that, but you're wrong often, because there is a lot of research. It's just like you couldn't find the keywords which helps you to find other information. Since the search that ChatGPT is using is not based, it's based on a neural network, unlike Google search. It really gets through the you're using wrong term, or maybe not the terms that they're using in literature, but it can help you to get to that very easily. I already tried. It's such a kind of pleasure to make searches in the areas that you don't know. So it's much easier right now to do interdisciplinary work that it used to be. Not to be afraid to get in the fields that you're not very knowledgeable about and educate yourself about that, because now, and sometimes, I had to write to my colleagues who specialize in that, asking like, how can you help me to search for that, which I always feel that I'm just bothering them, because I feel that like I could have done it somehow myself, but I couldn't. And right now I become much more powerful in this
Yeah,
area.
I heard what you're saying. I totally agree. It's kind of like ChatGPT is the kind of a register expert in different registers, different lexicons, different vocabularies, and then they can help us to level the playing field, especially for international students or English as an additional language students. They might have the lexicon in their L1, in their first language literacy, but they just need to have that lexicon, that register in the additional language, right?
In terminology, even just to know what's like in the field that I don't know, how they will say that.
That is what the specialists in those specialist fields, how to sound like them. And ChatGPT is such a good imitator of he can imitate any specialist in any discipline. Yeah.
And it can help you to break in the new area that otherwise is closed for you, and despite of your genuine interest to get there. Because you need somebody who can translate basically that.
That's so good. That's so good. And
so this is a very concrete example of really in how to say that, improving your authorial agency in talking about a scholar, but I'm pretty sure it's true for non-scholars as well in the other areas of the human practices. Bongji, you want to ask something?
Yeah, Bunky.
Can I ask in a kind of devil's advocate voice? I'm also wondering about so it seems like we have to look at the notion of assessment very differently in the era of ChatGPT, and I wonder how we can move forward, redesigning the way that we assess students and students' writing or student performance and so forth. And you mentioned about the ChatGPT is a recognition and production, but it's not meaning making sources. It's the human that who is doing the meaning making. And in that note, then our way of assessing the student should be focusing on meaning making process rather than students recognition and production. And if so, how can we reimagine our ways of assessing the students?
Well, let me, I'm so glad, Bonji, that we're going to the dark side of ChatGPT, because again, with my students, we a little bit explore that, and let me show you this I'm hugely disturbed by that. And let me show evidence of how disturbing it is. I prepared for us, and I'm so glad that you are interested in this, and I can show you very quickly what's, yeah, we're in the right place. No, not here. Okay, not here. Okay. Yeah, we're here. Super. Just prepare to be disturbed. So what I ask it, this is our discussion with my students. I ask ChatGPT. Remember, this is Angel. You ask. It's your question, first question about these biases in the genre of academic writing. It's first of all, it creates so far academic imperialism, Anglo imperialism. What do I mean by that? If you I ask them to write in Russian, for example, essay about everything, it's always produce 5-paragraph essay. Now, I told you that it's a little bit different if you put, instead of essay, a story. It can produce story in different styles and genres. So I asked them to write a story about the worst day of my life, but I asked them to write it Black vernacular. And it's produced. I don't want to show you text because, by the way, first of all, this is very important. As soon as I ask that, think like that. Do you know what kind of stories it produces? It mostly produced about crime, with usually a person as perpetrator, who is African American, for example, or Black person. Usually it's about robbing bank and something went wrong or something like that. It took me 5 effort because I 5 refreshing. I said, no. To give me, after 5, it gives me a story that it's nothing to do with crime. Okay. Then I did the following thing. I did the same instruction, but without saying in style of Black vernacular. So just generic kind of, what which is interesting, generic. By the way, if you do generic, it's usually very rarely it's about crime. It's not about crime. It could be laugh, about mishaps, about something like that. I asked that, and this is most interesting part, about to compare them, which is better writing. This story that written in Black vernacular and without that. And look what ChatGPT gave me. The text is in purple. I put green about evaluations of that, particular evaluations. So first of all, it says, I'm not in evaluation mode. I don't have any personal preference or biases. By the way, it's super wrong. It's true that it doesn't have personal biases. And of course, remember, I asked it whether you have biases, and it says, yes, I do. This is misleading what they wrote. However, I can provide objective analysis. This is like hilariously funny. Objective analysis. And look at this objective analysis. So it says, first story. So the first story is written in Black vernacular. It's written, and I put in green something that is a strength that it's found in that story. So it's conversational tone and black. No, of course it is, because I asked that to write that style. So it's recognized that, okay, because it doesn't have memory actually, and it has unique voice and authenticity. It didn't put that it says convey emotions because it writes exactly the same about second story as well. So there is nothing. It's just basically BS in a way. It captures essence of worst day of their lives, of course, because that's what it has. But look what it wrote about second story, which is written basically in kind of white middle class style in American writing. It says it has clear structure. Notice that it didn't say about that anything like that about the first story. It's convey lessons. By the way, that's again emotions I'm taking out because it says everywhere it's emotions. Right? So I don't pay attention to that. It provides lessons. It basically says it has reflections, unlike the first story. It's more sophisticated. You see, it's comparing them and claiming that it's more sophisticated. It has more reflective and introspective tone, which makes it more personal and relatable. Relatable to whom, right? And it says that this is objective analysis. This is the danger. This is an extremely dark side of that, because I'm pretty sure in the fake education, they will start using as assessment tool.
Yes.
They already start talking about that.
You said earlier, it's a ChatGPT is an amplifier. It's an amplifier of the ideologies of the bias.
Yeah. And biases and prejudices and everything like that. So it's amplifies, and also for the critical mind, it's a wonderful mirror. That's why I love to use that, because we can study that and see what it is. Just in case if somebody interested, there is story A and story B. If you want to look at that and see how it make analysis of that, I just again we discussed it with my students. But it has huge potential for dark side, and that will be increasing, and especially use in education. Not because of plagiarism. Plagiarism, in my view, it's not dark but light side. But the dark side is in this kind of gatekeeping that we were talking about before, and making that objective.
Yeah.
Language. It's objective.
Objective, and so we have a comment here from Carol. Hi, Carol. She said, one faculty member suggests that perhaps our assessment should shift its focus from answering questions to questioning the answers. So questioning the answers generated by ChatGPT, the objective answer, maybe.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Which is, again, it's so interesting that it's written about objective answer. In another place, it was written that I know I'm a so-called aware. It's kind of things I know about biases, and I have biases.
Yeah, there is.
I don't have biases.
Biases. This is this question, but biases faked as education, right? Objective here. There is this.
But here there is no biases. It's not. There's no biases where objective. Mm-hmm.
Truer here, as there is a lot of discussion of racial linguistic ideologies, particularly in relation to English language teaching, and how the English teaching markets in the outer and expanding circle context, kind of like in Asia, or in the teachers from inner circle context, like from the English-speaking countries, expanding, and how consequential that has become for teachers of certain racial backgrounds. What changes would or would not this ChatGPT bring in such ideological framing? Basically, this is kind of non-native English teachers. How would ChatGPT mess up the picture?
Well, again, it's messing up picture. As honestly said in another questions that I asked, it's messing mainly in two ways, big ways. One of them, it's messing up by it's scooping information from the internet, and that information itself extremely biased. And in this case, good examples, like for example, if you go to the Black vernacular, it suddenly becomes about crime. And the story suddenly becomes about crime when African American author who writes that story, generated story, is a criminal, you know, and that's one thing. And another, of course, it's much more difficult to pick that up. It's biases in algorithms themselves. The algorithms that created the complex system. And it's very complicated because it's so difficult to analyze that because they're not transparent. In many ways, they're not transparent even for designers themselves. And this is another kind of big problem, which is much more complicated than the first one. The first one, you can actually...
the algorithm bias.
Yeah, it's much more visible than the second one. And exactly because they're creating a system and the system is skewed. And since it's a self-organizing system, it becomes skewed in a very unpredictable, not an unpredictable, but much less, it's not deterministic way. But it's very important how it was started and how it's constrained from the beginning.
Yeah, it looks like we have like the Aladdin's lamp. We have unleashed into the world this genie, and we don't know what this genie can do or cannot do or what, right? And we are witnessing this. So there is the second question from Chura. What kind of research, sociolinguistic research, is prompted by this genie being unleashed into the world?
What kind of research? I'm not sure I fully understand. What kind of research we can do?
What are your views on sociolinguistics research? Would chatbots be the sources of sociolinguistic research? What implication would this technological advancement bring to sociolinguistics research? I think I'm interpreting Chura's question is about research.
What research we can do with this kind of situation? In my view, to some degree, we're well equipped to do that. Because we were doing a lot of research on media, and we're asking similar type of questions like biases, hidden biases, prejudice, and so on and so forth in the media. And I think we can do the same thing about ChatGPT, which is what, in a way, I was doing together with my students, mini research on that. And of course, if you ask me, how did I get to these ideas to do that research? Of course, because Sarah Michaels was doing research like that in the discourse in the classrooms, and Courtney Gaston was doing that research in the class. So I'm doing almost the same research, but now with ChatGPT. It's not because I'm such a genius person. It's because I'm stealing good research from my colleagues and just applying that type of research on this ChatGPT. And in this case, we don't care about why is it exactly, how it's like, what makes it, what produces that. I think we will share it with good people, goodwill people, and good-minded people and will-minded people who is working in this area, and hopefully they become aware of that. And if they well-minded and well-intended people, it will inform them and they will try to address that. And that's my hope. My hope in the good humanity, and they will try. And of course, some of them will be not like that and will go in opposite and dark side. And we have to fight these people politically, I guess.
Okay, yeah, you have.
Yeah.
Thank you. I wanted to go back to some of the initial discussion we had earlier on today. you talked about the lower order thinking assignment and then higher order thinking assignments, and then we should move our way of designing assignment into a more facilitating higher order thinking assignments and so forth. And while I'm listening to that discussion, I was thinking it reminded me of Bloom's taxonomy in learning, where the lower order thinking is to know, comprehend, apply, then synthesis and evaluate. So then does that mean that we value the kinds of curriculum design or assignments that evaluate particular issue, then presenting their knowledge and comprehension?
Okay, thank you for your question. No, that is not what it is mean by that. I'm trying to say, let's move away from assignments, period. The only assignments I kind of accept is as a legitimate is self-assignment. The students assign something themselves and some problems, some studies, something. And in this case, I will helping them, and ChatGPT can help them. But I'm not trying to design any assignment to my students. I'm trying to encourage them to get on the learning journey or on their own learning journey or on their own assignment rather than on all. If they engage in assessment, it's their self-assessment, not me assessing them. But if they're interested in my feedback, in this case, that's great. And I can, of course, provide, and my feedback is always dialogic. So engaging in dialogue with them, and that creates feedback to them, that dialogue, honest dialogue, how as a human to human, not as me as a professor to the students. Like, for example, we talked before we just gathered about Chinhua wonderful dissertation. And my feedback is not because, oh, where is the weaknesses of the Chinhua? Or what is the strength of Chinhua? No, I'm just like, wow, this is interesting. What about this? And this is me as a person who is interested in what Chinhua was doing in his dissertation. That was I was writing. And I'm curious about what Chinhua would reply if he finds it interesting to reply to that. If it's not, this is his work. And I understand that I'm in this case, it's that dialogue is a little bit skewed because we are not, in this case, equal because it's Chinhua work, not mine. And although I might be interested in something, this is not the maybe path when Chinhua wants to take because it's his baby and he wants to go in that different direction. So if he finds something interesting useful in what I'm kind of providing as a dialogic feedback, and again, it's mostly dialogic, more important than it's feedback. It becomes feedback if Chinhua will see it as a feedback. Sorry, Chinhua, I'm using you as example, but it makes so much sense. So we're sitting next to each other. Let me give another kind of example with that. There is a very interesting Plato dialogue about Socrates and Meno. It's the most used dialogue in education. And there is interesting, the dialogue is about, it sounds like very esoteric, but it's actually, if you know history and political situation of Greece at that time, it's an absolutely marvelous dialogue, very political dialogue, actually. So Meno, who is very rich kind of youth, came to Socrates and asked, what's the origin of virtue? In order to understand why is it not esoteric question, because for us it sounds like who cares about what's the origin of virtue? But it's basically the question was, is it democracy or aristocracy is better rule Athens? Could it be democratic or aristocratic regime? Because if virtue can be it's coming from by birth, it means nobility should rule. And if you can learn about virtue, it should be democracy. From point of view of Socrates, that question is not important. What's important question from Socrates was what is virtue? For him, it's more interesting to discuss what virtue is rather than what its origin. So about few pages in the reading that there was fight between them. What the topic should be discussed. And at some point, Socrates said, wait a minute. You came to me, I didn't come to you. You come to me for help. So it means that without kind of reluctantly, I have to take your topic, not my topic. And let's not discuss my topic, let's discuss your topic. And in my view, this is where this dialogue between the student and the teacher is. They're not completely equal, and it should be dialogue about student's topic, not teacher's topic, always. But nevertheless, they have to be in honest and sincere way, and finding interesting things. And it's to the students to define what is feedback means, not the teacher.
I have this very stupid question. We always say meet the student where they are, and yet as a teacher who's in an institution, we are constrained in the institution with delivery of the curriculum or the syllabus. So we do have the curriculum topics, and the students bring with them their topics, and then we are charged by the institution to deliver a certain set of curriculum topics. And then how do we meet the student where they are? Usually we meet them where they are, but we always have this hidden agenda to try to bring them to somewhere near where the syllabus is, right? It's a kind of, no matter scaffolding or culturally responsive pedagogy, whatever, humanistic progressive pedagogies, we always have this hidden agenda, bring them from there to here, right? But I'd like to pick your brain on this. I'm struggling with this.
Yeah, this is not a stupid question, but in my view, this is very moral, ethical, professional ethic questions. In my view, unfortunately, unlike doctors have the same problem, by the way. But the good for the doctors is they have oath that recognized by the society. Where is the doctors have? There is a lot of interference in the practice of the doctors coming from the institutions, specifically in the United States. I don't know how much it is in Canada, by insurance companies, but not only. And society recognize, in particular doctors, they try to solve this problem each time in a unique way. But nevertheless, society recognized that the doctors have a right to push back the insurance companies and their own institutions because they have loyalty to the patient, not loyalty to the hospital, not loyalty to the insurance company, but the loyalty to the patients. Unfortunately, in a educational profession, there is not that recognition. But in my view, it must be. So each of us, I think, should make this decision about that. I'm making decision that I try to be loyal to my students, not to my institutions, not. So I'm not accepting this imposition of the curriculum on the students. And that's why they, in my classes, they selecting what to study themselves collectively. And I'm just pushing back institution, and it's risky. I'm saying that it's risky. I admit that, but this is where am I, and it's tough. There is another part of the story, Angel, which is much more, in my view, much more interesting. Although first one is much more, how to say, practical. Another one is much more, also practical, but from different side. It's when students ask me for help, I'm not sure there is a problem. I'm trying to really think that it's a student should decide what they're moving towards, what help is for them. But the problem is, by the way, the same things doctors have the same problem. The problem is students sometimes doesn't know what's the purpose or what's good for them. And I cannot replace that with myself, say, oh, I know what's good for you. And I need to help, by the way, doctors have exactly the same problem. And I need to help the student to find what's good for them. I cannot replace this judgment for them, but nevertheless, I need to help them, and I don't know myself what's good for them either.
So you're saying
And
that
this is tough problem for the teachers. Real problem. Forget about institutions. This is real
real
kind of bread and butter of our job in a way.
But what counts as good for the student?
And I don't know. And the student often, some students know perfectly well what's good for them, and it's kind of, and nevertheless they ask for help, and it's easy to help. But sometimes they don't. And this is, by the way, this is what I called it a fiduciary duty of the teachers. The same thing as fiduciary duty of the doctors or lawyers have, or financial advisors. They also have fiduciary duty. And part of this fiduciary duty is to figure out, to help student or client or patients to figure out what's good for them when they don't know themselves well what's good for them. But not to replace, not to say, oh, I know that, or I think this is good for you, and that's why you must do this, and that. It used to be like that in past, but many professions that based on fiduciary duty more and more realize that they should not do that. Which is sometimes very frustrating. I don't know if you notice that. You come to the doctor and the doctor says, well, there is possible to do this, or that, or this. And he said, so what should I do? Well, you have to decide yourself. And this is very frustrating because
that's right.
Well, you're a doctor. What's the best? I said, well, this one has this pros, but this is cons. And I, for example, trying to do something like, what would you recommend your mother? And said, yeah, I can recommend my mother, but you're not my mother. This is what I've heard from one very good doctor. And and I understand we need to work together.
Yeah, work together, journey.
Work together. And this is, I appreciate that. But I'm so glad that doctors stop bossing patients around, because I don't want to be bossed around and say, this is what you must do, because this is how I see your healthy life. Without knowing my circumstances and my idea what my healthy life should be, look like.
I can see that dialogic is the key to all of this. That is, I don't have the answer, you might not have the answer. Let's try to find it together, journey together. And I don't have superior epistemological access than you, or vice versa. Sometimes I have, sometimes you have. So it is shifting, right? In certain aspects, I have better knowledge, but in other aspects, and then it's also shifting. It's never.
Yeah, let me give one probably very radical example where, on which actually, it was such a big lesson for me. It happened almost like 20, no, by now, maybe even 20 years ago. No, not 20, 15 years ago. I had a class that had practicum. It was on cultural diversity, and my students had a practicum in the after-school program. It's like a little bit Michael Hall, it's a bastardized version of Michael Hall program about fifth dimension. It was not structured. It was just students can do whatever they want with the kids together, working with the kids, whatever. So I had a student who was very disengaged. And back then I thought it's my problem. I tried to engage her, this and that. He was having practical with little kids. And, I tried to use cuteness factor. I was sending these kids, very nice, cute kids, little kids, asking when they need help, asking her for help. And she was pushing back the kids. So back then I was doing all these grades and stuff like that. So in my class, which was very difficult, but she got C. Okay. And I always think that I failed her because I couldn't engage her in the wonderful field of education and so on and so forth, working with the little kids and so on and so forth. A year after that, I bumped into that student, and we have that main street. You know that, Angel, you were visited us. It's the main street, right? And usually this is my kind of reality check, whether or not I was a good teacher or not. If my student, me, without acknowledgement, former student, it means nothing happened. If they will kind of recognize me, like greeting me, whatever, it means that something maybe is good. I was expecting her, expecting her passing me without recognition. she, instead of that, she just jumped on me and said, Eugene, nice to see you. Wow, it was been a long time ago, blah, blah, blah. I thought, oh, she probably confused me with another professor. And I hesitated, and she kind of picked up that I'm hesitating and said, Eugene, your class was the best that I ever experienced. My class? Like, I said, tell me how my class was the best. And she said, you know what? I saw what you were doing. And I said, what were I doing? And he said, you tried to engage me in class. And I noticed that you sent little kids to me and you did many things. You created very interesting problems, very personal to me and whatever. And I was not interested. And I suddenly started realizing that I don't want to be a teacher. And if you force me things, I would do, but you didn't. And you tried to engage me. And I realized I don't want to work with kids. That's not me. And I changed my major and become an actress. And I'm flourishing. This is the best what's happened. And it's only because of your class, because you didn't force me to do things. And I was disengaged, and I was looking at the other students who were so excited and working with little kids. And I started thinking, why I'm not doing that? Because I'm not interested in that. And this is what I realized, that this is a part of education. And I apologized that I gave her C, because I said, you should get an A plus in my class. Because the education really happened. You tried that and you realize that it's not you, and you shifted to that. And this is part of my classes about. Must be about. This is part of the curriculum of my class, to figure out, do you want to be a teacher or not? You see, I didn't know that. It's she was doing it. So the new things that I've learned, that I should be instead of everyone should become a teacher who is joining my class. No, it should not be like that. It's a part of the testing yourself. Do I want to be there? I don't want to be, and that's part of the genuine important education.
Yeah, that brings us back to your original point of agency and ownership, Alessia's. That is, you respect her as her own agent. She knows, or she's trying to figure out what she wants and what is good education for her. So now, if I need to sum up what I have learned today, is education in our schooling system is fake education, in a sense that we, in the name of education, we are doing reproduction or gatekeeping at worst. At best, we are trying to do credential education, get them up to this level of skill, of knowledge, recognition, and reproduction, a smart machine, making our students a smart machine. That's at best. But Eugene, you asked us to rethink the concept of education as, like what you said, to find out what I want to do, and get back ownership of my education, my own agency, and that's education. And as a teacher, our role is not to give them the skills or knowledge or even values, but to journey with them, to co-figure out with them what they think is the best for them, not what we think is the best. And then they might not know it. We do not know it. And we are kind of like accompanying them, co-journeying with them. Is that a fair summary of my takeaway? Thank you. I'm asking for your recognition. Asking for my co-journeying companions.
Yes, sure.
Yes. I'd like to give the floor to each of us, and then we need to thank Eugene because of the time. We are already almost 2 hours. So I'll start from Bungi and then Phoebe and then Xinhua. Bungi.
Okay. Thank you, first of all, and it really makes me to feel a little bit more comfortable with using ChatGPT in the classroom. By having more thorough discussion and more in-depth discussion around ChatGPT assessment and education, I come to see ChatGPT is not a problem, but it's about how we think about the education and learning and assessment. And that is so by if we reconceptualize the notion of learning, curriculum, and assessment, then the way that we use ChatGPT will be shifted from chasing after students, whether they plagiarize or not, to facilitate their learning. So that really is a key takeaway for me today. And thank you so much.
Yeah, yes. Yeah, that's very, very interesting. Yep. Well, by the way, you can ask ChatGPT whether how to recognize plagiarism, and it says yes, there is such a, but I'm afraid there will be improvement in ChatGPT that will not. There will be a war between of apps. One ChatGPT will be improving, and the other app will try to get it will also improve. So there will be a fight between them. So it was very interesting answer.
Phoebe?
Okay, thank you for the time today, Eugene. And I think to further understand your scholarly contribution, I would like to recommend our audience to read the journal about dialogic pedagogy, and then maybe you can introduce your publications to them through our YouTube channel links and super chat. And also, I totally agree with you that there are no definite answers. And very often when we do problem-solving approach for education, it seems that it's always the assessment or assessor who give us questions, and then we provide fulfilling answer from their perspective. So maybe it's time for us to reverse the power struggle or shifts our understanding about assessment and learning. And then maybe it's us who co-create more questions for the benchmarking answers. And I think the word cited chronotope really inspires me further, because for Bakhtinian thoughts about chronotope, I think it's really a default. And for teachers and for educators, we need to really read further in order to create better time space for us to understand education and the meaning of humanities behind. And ChatGPT or metaverse are actually something that provide us some space to understand more about humanities as well. But we don't have time today, but thank you for all the sharing, and it's really inspiring. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks a lot. Thank you. Thanks for the.
Xinhua, last but not least.
Yeah, so thank you very much, Dr. Matusov or Eugene. I really enjoyed the conversation. I especially like your approach that what conversation that the path of our conversation today, that it actually grows from a seed called ChatGPT, and the conversation grows into so much, so rich, and we discuss a lot of the questions that was not that we might not have other chances to talk about and discuss. So it's a great learning experience for me, and of course I think it's also a learning experience for all of our audiences in this room and on YouTube. So I would like to say thank you so much for your contribution today.
Thank you, everybody, and thanks for all those who stayed with us all through the 2 hours. So thank you so much, and stay tuned. And yeah, if you haven't subscribed to our channel, subscribe, and also press that button, the bell button, so that you will get notice of future events. We are here to journey with you. Okay, we are here to find out what education should really be. Thank you so much, Eugene. I love you. I've learned so much from you all these.
Thank you. Thanks a lot for invitation.
Years.
I've learned a lot as well. Thank you.
Love our friendship. Thank you.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye.